Okay, we're getting to the next point, which I believe is we don't worship Mary, that sort of thing. Oh, I'm ready for you, bud. I am ready for you.
Okay, number 3 is this.
Oh, and I'm being a little over top. He's being a little over and top here. I think we're both having a little fun with this, so please don't take my over the topness too seriously.
You Catholics, you worship Mary. I don't care what you say. I've literally argued with people over whether or not I worship the Virgin Mary. Now, I've made other videos about this, friends, where I talk about how, no one can really tell you if you're worshiping somebody. That's a judgment they're making based on something that they're interpreting.
This is so bad. Okay, so this is the there's a little bit of truth to that, but if you see someone bowing down before something, okay, worship has a meaning. All right, so if you give a little pinch of incense to Caesar, okay, the early church and said Caesar is Lord. The early church knew that was worship, right? They didn't have to look at the inwardness of your heart because worship is objective. What you do in worship is objective. So with the whole Catholics, maybe due to spiritual blindness, have no idea about this. Is that in their mind, like, if we don't call it worship, it's not worship. If I don't think on the inside it's worship, it's not worship. It, I mean, worship is what it is. All right? It doesn't matter if you don't think it is.
And I remember I made a video about this where I talked about how, if you look at what happens when a bunch of people go to an altar call and there's an evangelist up there and he's called everybody forward to the altar and they're bowed down and praying and he's standing there. If you just look at a photo of that, you could say, well, that looks like they're worshiping this guy because they're bowing down before him, they're looking at him, or they're doing what he tells them, and he's there interceding on their behalf or whatever. You could easily make that case. But here's the deal. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to look at some Protestant and say, well, you worship your pastor or you worship that evangelist, even though...
Because we know what's involved, and it goes beyond the surface level between the statues and everything else, and the prayers to Mary.
I could make that case based on what it looks like. I'm not going to do that because here's the deal. I can't judge your heart. I can't say whether you're a worshiper of that guy or whether you're a worshiper of Jesus. I can't do that. Now, I can have my ideas, but if I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and trust what you tell me, if you say, no, Keith, I'm not worshiping that preacher. I'm following what I believe the Spirit's leading me to do and bowing down in prayer and he's leading me through that. Hey, okay, fine. But yet, why don't you do the same thing for us? Why is it that
Because I know what you're doing.
If a Catholic is praying in front of a statue of the Blessed Mother, that...
Because you shouldn't have statues in the first place in a religious context.
That all of a sudden now, or asks the Blessed Mother for intercession, then now all of a sudden that's worship, right?
Worship is as worship does.
Was it worship when Jesus talked to Moses and Elijah on the Mount of
That's not even remotely the same.
Transfiguration? Okay, now remember what Jesus said about the saints of old. He says that he's the God of Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, the God of the living, not the God of the dead. So in Catholicism, we don't...
Teach us how to pray, Our Father who art in heaven. We direct prayer to God.
Believe that the saints are so separated from us that they can't respond to our intercession. Now, does that mean that we understand how it all works? No. Because people say things like, well, you're saying that Mary can hear all of your prayers, and how can she do that? She's not omnipotent. She's not omnipresent. We agree.
I believe it was my late friend Steve Hayes who said all the defenses of Mary's essentially omniscience could be Unitarians could use that to get around the fact that we pray to Jesus and all the divine attributes that are given to Jesus. So this is one of the reasons why it's good to be involved. And I know my channel is devoted to Catholicism, but it's very, very important not to just have one topic you're involved with, because you can spot these inconsistencies, and also you make better arguments. So you can tell, like, okay, you want to make an argument that works against this guy and works against the Unitarians. Or, better said, if he was arguing against Unitarians and Protestants, he wouldn't be making this argument right now.
We don't understand how it works. We don't have all those mysteries solved because we're in this finite life, but she's not, friends. She's part of that great cloud of witnesses that the book of Hebrews talks about in chapter 12, where it talks about how we are surrounded by these great heroes of the faith. Now, if they are surrounding us, and of course we see in the book of Revelation that the prayers of the martyrs and saints are being offered up to God, you know.
The saints are people on earth, not prayers from people to saints to God.
Oh, there's this idea of intercessory prayer that's taking place in heaven. And like Christians have done for 2,000 years, we participate in that. But it doesn't mean that we worship Mary. Read the Catechism. It talks all about that. Okay, so that...
Okay, well... Alright, so what Catholic theologians will say is we don't worship Mary. We hyperdulia Mary. Like, there's a distinction. Like, they just make up this distinction between dulia and worship. But I wanted to show you, before we move on to this, this is from a Timothy Kaufman article. Let me get my handy-dandy highlighter out. Alright, speaking of what Catholics say, we merely hyper-venerate her. It is more than the dulia we give to other saints, but it is less than the latria, which is of course reserved for God alone. We are very good at maintaining the distinctions between them. So his hypothetical interlocutor. What makes such a response implausible is that the English translations of papal statements on Mary use the word worship, where hyperveneration ought to be used. For example, Pius XII's papal encyclical uses worship repeatedly to describe Roman Catholic veneration of Mary. There is nothing more sweet, nothing dearer than to worship, venerate, invoke, and praise with ardent affection the Mother of God, conceived without stain, an original sin. Here, let me... The Virgin Mary of God is worshipped with more intense devotion. Okay. But let this holy city of Rome be the first to give the example. The city from which the earliest Christian era worshipped the Heavenly Mother, its patroness, with a special devotion. Ugh, such blasphemy. Ugh. Alright. Sorry. Let my feelings get in the way. To get to the bottom of Rome's veneration, we really ought to look at the Latin version of the text. The Latin uses various conjugations of the infinitive I'm not good in Latin, colere, to worship. So he's showing that it's there, and there. All right. Let me finish that. Yeah, there. Okay. Roman Catholic apologists may object to us rendering colere as worship, but we remind them that this is their translation, not ours. If it is hyperveneration that is intended by colere, I am bad at Latin, so please forgive me for my mispronunciation, then the translators at the Vatican, whose primary language is presumably Latin, ought to know better. Perhaps the Latin Vulgate can be of some help, as Exodus 20 verse 5, when forbidding idolatry, the Vulgate implores us. So, here we go. Here, let me scroll down. They're using the verb for worship there. The same Latin that in the text. That's forbidden. And that's the verb that Pius XII used to tell us to worship Mary. Oh, I've also noticed that the Protestant American Catholicism is way different than old school Catholicism, old world Catholicism. I went to Poland. It was shocking to the American Catholics I went to. We went to the Lady of Korsakova shrine. All these Catholics were so freaked out, and I was raised Catholic as well. It was disturbing. Okay, you don't see that sort of stuff anymore. Maybe you saw it in the 50s here, but I don't know. Again, you're a post-Vatican II convert. You should know better, man. Oh, okay. All right, let's continue.